you actually do? If we're honest with ourselves, a lot of us would say that the answer to that question is no. Workforce engagement, as a proxy for satisfaction, has hovered at around 30% in the United States for the past 25 years. It's even lower in other parts of the developed world. If you think about it, it's a huge failing that we can't do better than that. What's fascinating is that we've never had more books or frameworks or leadership training and even podcasts like this one about how to make work better. Hundreds of millions of people just go through the motions every day at work, and that's terrible. So today's guest, my friend and HBS classmate, Debbie Lovich, has spent over 3 decades working inside some of the world's biggest organizations as she has been at Boston Consulting Group, advising leaders who genuinely want to create workplaces that are better, but they haven't figured out how to translate that intention into everyday behavior in a way that truly makes a difference. The problem isn't that these leaders aren't trying or that they don't care. It's that they're focused on the wrong things, and the way they're going about it is making things even worse. In her new book, Make Work Work, Debbie introduces 5 daily practices that, when done consistently, can transform how people experience work. And it isn't about launching a big transformation or rolling out yet another HR program. It's about what leaders can do every single day. So today we're going to talk about why work feels so broken to so many people, what it really takes to create joy at work, and how any leader, or honestly any of us, can take part in changing our workplaces for the better. I'm J.R. Lowry. This is Career Sessions. Debbie, welcome back to the show. This is your second time with me, so you must be especially brave.
Or especially lucky.
Well, I guess that we will leave that up to the interpretation of our audience. So let's get going. You have a new book out. You spent 30 plus years working at the Boston Consulting Group and advising organizations. So what finally pushed you to write a book now?
Yeah. So if I look at the arc of my career, I spent the first part thinking that smart people did strategy and operations and sort of the softies did people stuff. And then about halfway through my career, I realized that if I look at all the projects I did for clients and the work I did for clients, they definitely had great impact, but they didn't have as much impact as I aspired for them to have. So that I started to look at what got in the way. What got in the way? People, leadership, culture, ways of working, behavior. And so I started to say, I have to address this stuff. So I went in to work on the people stuff. Actually, my first client was BCG. And I found out that changing behavior is anything but soft. It is hard. And especially senior leader behavior, when you have dozens, hundreds, thousands of leaders, to get them all work differently, to drive value creation, that was like the coolest thing I could be doing. So that's what I've been doing for the past decade and a half. And then I'd say in the last decade, I really started focusing on what I call radical employee centricity, which is if you treat your employees as important as you treat your customers and shareholders, there's tremendous value unlock for the company. So it's not just you treat your employees nice because it's the right thing to do, but employees who enjoy their work can create so much value. So I discovered this thing. I've written about it. And so now I want to get those 2 ideas, the leadership piece and the employee value, they sort of skate together, because what is the easiest way to unlock employee value to make work enjoyable, or the title of my book, to make work work? What's the easiest way to do that? Is leaders and what leaders do every day. And so that's what the book is for, to really get this message out there that every leader has in him or herself the ability to make work enjoyable for his or her people and her team or her organization. And in doing that, they could unlock so much value for their organizations besides just making the people's lives better every day.
What's interesting about this, all these business books have been read. We're doing training for leaders and employees. And yet, as you point out in the book, work still sucks for a lot of people. So what are we getting wrong?
Well, first of all, training doesn't work. Okay. I tell people, and you will appreciate this, you don't get in shape by watching an exercise video from the couch. Nor do you get in shape by going to a spa for a week, because you'll go back to sitting in your desk all day or your sedentary life. You also won't get in shape by saying, I'm going to go to Pilates every morning at 5 a.m. because you're going to hit snooze and you're not going to go. The way you get in shape is by walking to work, doing walking meetings, building fitness that's doable into your natural rhythms and routines. But what organizations spend billions on is the spa, the watching an exercise video from the couch, or Pilates classes that nobody goes to. And so it just doesn't take. And so the secret to building muscle, to building leadership capability, is not doing offsites and training and webinars. The secret is to make small changes in your day-to-day work that just build habit and build muscle. And so people understand that work could be better. They understand that leaders could be better, but the answer they're putting against it, the solve, just doesn't take.
Yeah, there's certainly a heavy emphasis of behavioral science that underpins your 5 practices. Just the idea that you've got to make it simple, you've got to make it habitual, you've got to do it consistently, or you're not going to continue to do it over time. And I think that's where a lot of these things fall down. I mean, a lot of leadership books are at 50,000 feet. They'll talk about these big thematic things. They don't really bring it down enough to what you can do. A lot of other books, I think, do a decent job of that. Your book certainly is very focused on saying, these are 5 practices. They seem really simple. They're not as simple as they seem if you really want to put them into practice, and you've got to make them habits.
It's also interesting because there are a lot of books out there that give you a checklist and do these things. I think one of the things about the 5 behaviors in the book, the 5 practices that helps them take, is that they're actually really rewarding to do. And they're really multiplicative in their impact. This is like doing something that it just gives energy and in return gives you back energy. And so hopefully people get addicted to doing these things because they're so rewarding to do. And you see the multiplicative impact right away.
So let's get into them. I'll rattle them off and then I'll let you kind of explain each of them in turn. Celebrate someone, go see and help, be interested, co-create, do it first. Let's go through them.
Yeah. So let's start with celebrate someone. So I start that chapter with a story about this very senior leader I worked with whose team was just like not productive, bad morale, bad culture, and I interviewed all of his senior directors one-on-one and they were like, he hates us. We're never good enough for him. This was in a pharmaceutical company, a biotech company. They're all like clinical geniuses. And I go back and I tell him, your team thinks you hate them. And he's like, what? I have the best team on the planet. And I'm just like, well, when have you told them that? He goes, they don't need to hear it. They know it. I'm like, no, actually, they need to hear it. And so this celebrate people is just every time you have a positive thought about someone, tell the person, like, JR, you are so awesome because I don't know how you created this podcast in your spare time while you work full time and you like are this runner and hiker and walker. Where do you find the time for it? And it's amazing. Like that's a specific compliment. I happen to believe that and it's true and it's genuine. So it's not like make stuff up or say, oh, you're great. Oh, you're great. But it's like the move, celebrate someone is just, if you think anything positive at any time about anyone you work with, let them know. And by the way, it doesn't have to just be your team underneath you. It could be your peers. It could be your boss. Bosses are lonely, but you got to get the balance right. Okay. And we know from behavioral science that people, I think it is, need to hear something like 5 positive things to every negative thing to feel good about themselves. And yet we're not saying the positive things. Should we go see and help? All right. So go see and help is really built on servant leadership, if you remember that from agile methodologies. But it's the notion of go to where the work is and help people out. So what I tell executives is you're meeting at these gleaming corporate headquarters or fancy hotels and you get together all day for your executive meetings. You've gotten so disconnected from what's happening at the rock face of the work. Instead, why don't you do your meeting in a manufacturing plant or in a retail store or in a distribution center? And before the meeting, go out on the floor and talk to people and ask them, how can I make your job easier? What can I take off your plate? What gives you stress? And then when you get to your executive meeting, talk about it at the meeting. I talk about Hubert Joly, who I'm so privileged to have worked with recently. And Hubert was the CEO who turned around Best Buy when Amazon got into consumer electronics and they started to go online. If you remember, there was Circuit City, there was Radio Shack, there was Best Buy. Okay, Circuit City, Radio Shack, out of business. Hubert took this very employee-centric mindset. And before he took the CEO position, he worked in the stores and he just spent time with the front line. And he learned, what can we do as an organization to help them be more effective in their jobs? And he's written in his book, his wonderful book, The Heart of Business, everything I needed to know about turning around Best Buy was coming from the front line. So that's the go see and help. Get on the floor and help folks.
Yeah. And as I was reading that piece, I was thinking back to when I was at Fidelity. This goes back probably almost 20 years at this point. And we would do meetings. I can't remember how frequently we would have them, every 6 or 8 weeks, maybe every quarter. And we would go to a different site to do the meetings, to your point, because most of our organization were call center reps, thousands of people answering, in that instance, calls from people who are participating in a benefit plan that Fidelity administered, like a 401k plan or a pension. And every time we met, we would have our meeting, but then we'd spend time with the management team there. We'd do events with the employee population. And they loved the fact that all of us came to them. Even if we didn't spend a ton of time with them, we were certainly being visible to them. And I think that made a huge difference in those circumstances. And it certainly reinforced for me the value of getting out there and being visible to your employees and making sure that you're breaking through the layers of management chains and really hearing about what their experience is like.
That's exactly right. You've got it. I worked with a client years ago who was a big pharmaceutical company, and pharmaceutical companies have huge sales forces. So they always have an open territory. And so the executives would go out for a week, a quarter and go sell. And that was magical because they were helping out the district manager who was short-staffed, but they also were just in tune with what it was like at the rock face of the customer interaction. And the reaction you get, like what you said, when you were out in the call centers, people loved it. That's the energy. Remember I said, like, these are positive things. It makes you want to do it again because people are so happy to see you. It makes you feel like a rock star. It really is reinforcing energy.
For sure. All right, let's go to the third one. Be interested.
Be interested. So this is just asking people about themselves, being interested in the people on your team as a human, not as a worker. It's what do you do outside of work? How'd you end up here? Where's your family from? What do you do for fun? What do you want to do long term? What are your career goals? People want bosses and leaders who care about them. And you then remember the details. So in my contact information for people, in the notes section, I write down the details. So next time I talk to them, I could be like, oh, how's your son's college applications going? And they're like, whoa, Debbie, remember that? But it's really being interested in their lives. And I get a little bit of pushback when I talk about this. They're like, some people are not comfortable talking about themselves. They may be very introverted. Okay, that's fine. Make it safe. Talk about yourself first. And don't go deep. Just say, here's what I'm doing on the weekend. What are you doing? If you offer about yourself, that's also generous. And it makes it psychologically safe for them to offer about themselves. And it just shows you're interested in people. And it helps people feel valued, not just as someone who does great work, but as a whole person, part of your team.
I think for a lot of leaders, it's uncomfortable. You get some who are great at walking the floor. They remember people's names. They remember the details. They can make it seamless. They light everybody up. They just bring energy. And others are so awkward about it that it just feels like a horror show for all parties involved, right? And I think having like a repertoire of questions that you can go to, or having a method of engaging people in a way that doesn't feel awkward for them or awkward for you in your style, I think takes time to develop. So a lot of leaders obviously are interested in their people. They're certainly time constrained and they can't engage as deeply in every conversation that they would probably ideally like to be able to. But it's just making the most of those little moments, whether it's passing somebody in the hallway or bumping into them going in or out of the bathroom even, or in the cafeteria or in the elevator. I mean, there's just lots of opportunities for those 30-second conversations that will just bring a little bit of extra lift to somebody's day if you take advantage of them. There's also the people who just don't, right? You stand in the elevator next to the CEO and they don't say a word to you. That's the thing you're going to remember, is that they didn't say a word to you. They didn't even say hi.
Yeah, totally. The elevator, is so funny. In the BCG office in Boston, we have floors 8 to the top. So there are people who get out before, but as soon as we hit 8, I'm like, okay, this is the BCG Express. I'm Debbie. Who are you guys? And people appreciate it. It just warms it up. Like, these are colleagues, right? But you're right. It is awkward. And by the way, it's awkward for the CEO too. Maybe they don't know how to do it, but they know everyone knows them. So you almost have to.
Yeah, you almost have to. But at the same time, I see a lot of senior leaders who are like, pretend there's nobody in here with me so I can just sort of be alone with my thoughts for 30 seconds. And phone has become the ultimate cure for social awkwardness. And unfortunately, it's just making it worse.
Yeah. Yeah. But again, all these practices, as soon as you do it, the positive instant feedback you get just gets you hooked on it, right? Ooh, I like talking to random people in the elevator who are all colleagues of mine. So I know we have something in common. I like that. And I like getting to know people, which is great. And then the problem starts when people are like, Debbie, you introduced yourself to me yesterday or the last week. I'm like, I'm sorry, my brain, please remind me your name again, right? You got to be okay with that.
You do. I'm terrible at remembering names, and I work at it. Age is not helping that. And
exactly.
I will just say to people, look, I'm terrible at remembering names. You may have to tell me your name again, but I will remember you. And I think it just helps take some of the pressure up, right? It's admitting a little bit of weakness and vulnerability in a way that people can relate to. And in my case, it's
That's right.
not just made up.
And it makes you so human as a leader. Even saying that, it's just, we're interested. So that's the third. Should we move into the fourth? Co-create everything?
Sure.
So co-creation is a little harder. Co-creation is more anything that you are working on as a leader that's going to impact some group of employees. Have someone, at least someone, at best a couple of those employees on the team with you working on it. Because what happens is we make these top-down changes, these off-to-the-side projects, these Gen AI use cases, and then we're like, okay, let's roll them out. And they never get adopted the way they should be because they don't work as well as they should be because you haven't gotten adequate input from the people who are going to use it. And the world gets this with consumer products. There's so much customer level interaction, piloting, alpha, beta, gamma, feedback loops, co-creation with customers. But it's so ironic when it comes to work. We don't do that. And every change we do at work, every reorg, every new technology deployment, every new work stream, every new approach impacts people. So we got to do the same customer stuff with our employees. And that could take lots of different forms. It could be take a couple and put them on the team, create an employee advisory panel and have the team off to the side that's doing this read out to them every week like they're the client or do a focus group with them. I'm working with a client right now where we're doing a huge transformation program. And we literally communicated to the entire organization, we want your ideas. And there's a website they could go to put their ideas in. Every idea is categorized and routed to the right leader. And the person gets a response like, here's what we're doing with it and why. Can we talk more? Or here's why actually it doesn't work, but thank you. Keep them coming. And man, is it energizing. Because the whole goal of these behaviors, by the way, is to unlock employee joy, which unlocks value creation for the company. And boy, this stuff, it makes it feel like we're all in this together. And so this co-creation is a little harder to do because you've got to pull the people on your team or you have to create the advisory panels or you have to create the infrastructure to really make people feel a part of everything you're doing and then it's not top down. But when you do this, remember Jim Whitehurst from our section, he wrote a book called The Open Organization after he went from Delta Airlines to Red Hat. And he saw Red Hat, that company was all co-creation. He's like, what is my job as CEO if everyone's self-motivated and doing their own work? And what he realized, and he wrote in his book, is something like change management is for when you've done a bad job at the work. If you do the work in the wrong way and you need to convince people it's in their best interest to adopt it, that's change management. If you do real co-creation, change what? This is just how we do things. So that's the fourth.
Yeah. And I think in the scheme of things, frankly, that one's more than a little bit harder. I think it's a lot harder for most people because first of all, leaders feel like they have to have all the answers and they don't necessarily want to feel like they have to go out and solicit input on them. They want to move quickly and they think engaging employees in the process slows them down. They don't think employees will have a valuable perspective. All those reasons that people put in their heads about why they can't, shouldn't, don't want to do this stuff. I think it's a lot harder and it's countercultural in a lot of organizations. I talk about Red Hat built on the usage of an open source platform, Linux in their case. And that's really how that whole company was built and grown.
Founded, yeah.
So it's in their ethos, right? And we've seen more of that open source mentality in the era of the internet, right? This crowdsourcing and all of the things out there from Wikipedia on that are about people working together to make something better than it could ever be with people just working individually on their own. But it's still grudgingly finding its way into most of corporate America. And I think that really is about leaders' egos and their processes and their willingness to make time for this early rather than and fear. And all of those things. And that's why this one is the one I think of the five that's the hardest.
I agree. Here's how I've been working around it. So it doesn't have to be all the way to a Red Hat, total crowdsource company, like literally an email box where people can send ideas and you staff someone to respond to them. That's super easy to do. As a leader to any team, you just need to start saying, make sure you have the employees impacted have a voice on that team. And here are a couple ways you could do it. So yes, making Red Hat is definitely very hard, but there are baby steps that actually get you a lot of the way there. But you're right in what you said. It's a mindset thing. And so what's helped me on the mindset thing is the customer discovery wave. You do this with your customers. Why not do it with your employees who, by the way, are customers who choose every day how much energy to bring to work? So can you turn your customer stuff, which you already have, on your employees? And we got customer journeys and design thinking and segmentation and personalization and A/B testing and crowdsourcing and and customer feedback, right? You can't buy a product today without customer feedback. How many times do we ask employees for feedback? Once a year, twice a year, long surveys that nothing happens as a result. So I just need to pull them over to say employees are customers too, because you're spot on that mindset's the issue.
Let's go to the last one.
All right. Do first. So I start this chapter with the story of this new Starbucks CEO who takes the job at Starbucks, but says, I'm going to still live in Southern California and private jet up to Seattle whenever I need to be there. Oh, and by the way, I need everyone to be back in the office. Like, hello, disconnect. This is not the only reason Starbucks is totally failing, but it can't help. And
on top of that, it's here's my ginormous pay package while the average person at Starbucks is barely earning a living wage.
That's it. You can't ask anybody to do anything that you don't do first. You want everyone to adopt Gen AI and rethink how they spend their day and their work streams. You better do it first and talk about it and talk about how hard it is and how rewarding it is and how scary it is. And once you start doing it and you see how people react, it will become addictive.
And I think this one is ultimately about role modeling. And obviously role modeling, showing people is a lot more powerful than just telling them to do something because you're showing them that you're willing to do it too.
Absolutely. And by the way, if you can't do it, you'll think twice before asking everyone else to do it.
So for a leader who's listening and saying, okay, this sounds great. Where do I start? Where should they start?
You just start by starting. Like I literally would start with the celebrate them. That's the easiest one. You have a positive thought about anyone. Say it. I coached a leader of the big transportation company, very gruff, whatever. And people even use the words abusive about him. And so I just had him start doing that, celebrate them. And people were literally sending me notes like, whatever you did to Sam. And it was nothing. It was nothing. But the cultural ripples and the performance and the energy, and boy, was that amazing.
It's about feedback, right? Positive or negative feedback. And the ratio, you said 5-1. I've heard some people say it needs to be up closer to 10-1. But the point is that you need to be delivering those specific bits of positive reinforcement all the time. Don't leave a meeting don't be in a meeting without mentioning these things. Don't be in a one-on-one without mentioning these things. Don't be in the elevator without mentioning these things. Have the ability where you're constantly giving some little piece of specific positive reinforcement. I think in the scheme of things, I won't say it's always easy, but it's the one that gives you, back to the point you talked about earlier, that dopamine hit for yourself. Because I just gave a person this positive bit of feedback. That felt good to them. It also feels good to me. And it makes you want to keep doing more of it. And I think if you can get that cycle going, then it becomes easier to do some of the other things like being interested in working way up to probably the hardest one, which I still think is co-create.
Yeah, absolutely. And remember, the meta goal here is to have an organization where everyone is excited to be there every day, which doesn't mean every minute of work is joyful. Actually not. Yeah. But on average, when people say, hey, do you enjoy your work? Your answer is yes. Did you enjoy your work this week? Your answer is yes. Did you enjoy work today? Mostly yes. Sometimes we could have bad days. My research shows when employees enjoy their work, they are half as likely to quit. They are anywhere from 2 to 4 times as motivated to bring their best to work every day. And in a recent piece I put out in HBR, they sell 25% more per hour than people who don't enjoy work. So there is value on the table, just like the customer revolution decades ago. I believe we're on the precipice of the employee revolution. And so the value on the table is there. The unlock can be tiny little things that just become multiplicative. So just start by starting.
And we need something, because employee engagement scores haven't moved in the last generation, 25, 30 years. So everything we've been trying is not working. It goes back to what you said earlier in the conversation, that all these big programs and the training, the books, the retreats, none of that's working in the way that we want it to. So we've got to try something else. I think the idea of small practices matters. For a mid-level person listening to this, we talked a little bit earlier about leaders, but for a mid-level manager or mid-level person, what can they do to help bring this into the culture of their organization?
Mid-level managers are so important in my mind because they are the providers of this emotional context in which their teams live. And they're the coaches to the frontline manager to help them drive it. So a mid-level manager has to role model this. They need to coach their frontline leaders in doing this. And they also have to give feedback up high. And if a mid-level manager is doing this in one part of organization and they start seeing performance, this beautiful work that works, performance, morale, performance, motivation, virtuous circle going, their group will perform better than others. And that will send the message up high. So I think this is applicable to a frontline supervisor, a mid-level manager, an executive. And ironically, I think it's also applicable to individual contributors and employees. Like, you could give a compliment that's genuine. You could ask a peer how they spend their weekend. You could say, hey, I heard something's going on in corporate. Let's find a way if we could get our voice heard. You could change the dynamic. I've had junior people on my teams change the dynamic all the time. Like, you're not a victim.
Yeah. Well, if you're going to work every day and you're not happy, you're quiet quitting, you're job hugging, you're whatever you're doing, you have an us-them relationship with work. It may be tactically necessary because you need a paycheck, but at the same time, you don't want to live in that situation. Work careers are too long to have an us-them mentality and constantly be looking over your shoulder and worrying about it. And I think everybody needs to change that dynamic. I think we've made work so utterly unenjoyable for so many people that it's like a hollow form of capitalism in a way.
Imagine this. You're one of these employees who are working for the paycheck. The place is terrible. You feel like I can't do anything about it. And then imagine something small good happens. New snacks in the cafeteria. Imagine if you take a minute to write a note to whatever leader is in charge of that. And you say thank you. That actually made a huge difference. If you're open to other ideas, I got plenty. You can do something. Because by the way, that's not a complaining way to do it. You have to find a little thing to say thank you about and say, if you want more, we could give you more.
So I know you do a lot of writing and thinking about the future of work more broadly. Apart from applying practices like the ones you describe in your book, what else do you want to see in the workplace of the future?
I'm still pushing for more enjoyable work. And I think it is critical when it comes to Gen AI and agentic AI and this whole technology explosion right now. Because in my heart of hearts, I think most organizations are going about this wrong. and they're pushing technology for productivity and productivity alone, as opposed to saying, here's your work. Here's what this technology can do. How can it make your work more enjoyable? How can it take away the stuff that sucks your soul? And by the way, like customers, employees are all different. So one person's joy is another person's toil. And so I really worry where we're going with technology right now. And I think this whole thing about making work, if we approach AI in the same way, co-create with employees, focus on helping them in their work, celebrating people who find ways to do it, the productivity will solve for itself. And we're at this crossroads of how you decide to deploy it. I think just everything in the book and everything that I'm trying to push around moving from transaction track to work that works gets magnified with this and could go much worse or much better with AI. And so that would be my last message. This is not separate from your technology agenda. It actually has to be the core of your technology agenda.
Well, something as disruptive as AI can be disruptive in a good way or disruptive in a bad way. And I think the jury's still out on how we're going to see this play out. And that's what everybody is focused on and worried about.
The jury is still out on how we're going to see this play out, but we all have agency, especially as leaders, to drive how this is going to play out. We can make sure it plays out in a much more human-centric, employee-centric, people-centric manner. But I want every leader to be at cause to tip the scales to make it come out the way it should come out.
Yeah, agency is a really important point. I think from the leader all the way down to the front line, you have to have agency in your professional life. Otherwise, it will happen to you. And odds are it will happen to you in ways that you don't always like. And if you want to tilt the odds in your favor, you've got to take ownership.
You got it.
Book comes out in November, available for pre-order now.
It's called Make Work, the 5 daily practices of the employee-centric leader. And it's out, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever you buy your book. So thank you for helping me amplify, my friend.
You are more than welcome. So have a good day.
All right. You too.
Okay. So what should we take away from our discussion with Debbie just now? First of all, work doesn't improve through big programs. It improves through small daily behaviors. I mean, that's really the premise of her book and the 5 practices that she covers. And the way that you as a leader show up or you as an individual show up matters more than any strategy, deck, or culture initiative, because it's these small behaviors that compound over time, that compound across people in a way that becomes meaningful. Second, and we didn't talk about this so much, but certainly a key highlight that Debbie mentioned right at the end is that the idea of employee joy is a better goal than employee engagement. We use employee engagement. It's the measure that's been out there for 25 or 30 years that Gallup came up with. But there's a big difference between being engaged, which means checked in, and truly enjoying your work. And when people truly enjoy their work, it drives better performance, it drives better retention, it drives better innovations. Third, these 5 practices are simple, but they're not automatic. Celebrate someone, go see and help, be interested, co-create, lead by example. The power is in doing them consistently, even if you don't always do them perfectly, and pick a place to start. Don't try and make it like a New Year's resolution where you throw yourself into something and you stop doing it by the second Friday of January. That has to be something that you really work on bit by bit over time. Fourth is that culture isn't just about what leaders say, it's about what people experience. And this is where this idea of employees as customers that Debbie talked about, the transaction trap, the us-them mentality, all of that really comes into play. You want a workplace where people actually want to contribute. I mean, who wants to work in a workplace where it feels like us-them all the time? And then finally, importantly, is that everybody plays a role and everybody has agency. If you're a C-level leader, a middle manager, even an individual contributor, you can bring these practices into action in your team, in your organization, and all of that adds up in making your organization a place where people enjoy coming to work. I invite you to subscribe to Career Sessions on Apple Podcasts and Spotify or YouTube. If you found this discussion enlightening, sign up for my membership community, which is called Pathwise, and our newsletter, Path Wisdom. Thanks. See you next time.